Mr. President. I rise this morning to discuss national defense and, in particular, the importance of the NATO alliance, as quite a number of our friends from NATO have arrived in Washington to celebrate the 75th annual meeting of this important defense organization. And I can hardly talk about national defense and NATO and the importance of keeping our defenses strong without calling attention to the sad fact that our former colleague, Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma, passed away yesterday. I am told that Senators Lankford and Mullen will seek recognition at a later time to speak extensively about this remarkable statesman who has passed from among us. But and members will be notified of when that might be, should they want to join in. But at this point, at this pivotal moment when I wish to talk about national defense, let me just say a word or two about my friend and colleague of some 30 years, Jim Inhofe. As a young man, as a young family man, Jim Inhofe quickly learned how to build a business and create jobs, and he did so successfully. Only a few years later, as a municipal leader, he found out how to build consensus, and he took that knowledge with him to Capitol Hill as a member of the House of Representatives, and then as our colleague here in the United States Senate. And Jim Inhofe demonstrated that he continued to know how to build consensus and get things done for his fellow Oklahomans as well as for his fellow Americans. Anyone who knew Jim Inhofe knew that he was a dedicated Christian. Jim Inhofe was a man of great faith with, in particular, a heart for sub-Saharan Africa. He visited there countless times, encouraged numerous, probably hundreds of his fellow senators and representatives to accompany him to visit some of the most challenged countries in sub-Saharan Africa. He hosted countless prayer breakfasts there. He got to know the leaders in those countries and their families by name. He was a remarkable Christian friend to those in Africa. Jim Inhofe was an accomplished pilot. He flew solo around the world at age 56. As a member of Congress, he was known as a straight shooter who was not afraid to challenge the conventional wisdom, as he did so on numerous occasions. Jim and his wife, Kay, were married for 64 years. Together, they had 4 children and 12 grandchildren, one of whom they found and adopted and rescued during a trip to Africa. I would mention that Kay Inhofe has been a special friend and advisor to my wife, Gail, for these decades. Again, I'm informed that Senators Mullen and Lankford will lead a fuller discussion of this remarkable statesman who's passed from among us. But today, as I talk about national defense and NATO, I send my love, and we in the Senate send our love and condolences to the entire family and to the state that he loved, Oklahoma. And then, Mr. President, I would note, as members have seen and as the public is reading and hearing about, that this week 32 nations are gathering in Washington for NATO's 75th anniversary summit. Our alliance has reached this remarkable milestone, 75 years. Its longevity reaffirms its past success and its enduring value. And our bond must remain strong, particularly at this hour. We are in the most dangerous global security threat since World War II. Almost all of our witnesses before the Armed Services Committee tell us that we are in the most dangerous global threat security since generations. As we navigate today's new challenges, NATO still stands as an indispensable alliance. In this consequential moment, NATO is receiving a new leader. I congratulate the outgoing Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, and I welcome our new Secretary General Mark Rutte. NATO's 75th anniversary and its leadership transition provides senators an opportunity. We have a chance to remember why NATO matters, and we have a chance to call upon every member, every nation member, to recommit to our alliance. I call upon my colleagues in both houses and in the administration, our friends, to recommit to this important and vital alliance. As Mr. Rutte takes office, he has a significant challenge to confront, and frankly, we all do. As I have pointed out from this desk numerous times, NATO faces a new axis of aggressors. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are banding together. They are banding together to help Russia on its illegal invasion of Ukraine, and they're banding together to pursue their designs on the free nations of this world. This new axis poses a set of growing, interlocking strategic threats to the United States and our allies. In their own way, they've all been supporting Russia's illegal and unprovoked war on Ukraine. And Mr. President, at this moment, I would have to pause and note the shameless and vicious Russian attack just earlier this week on a children's hospital in Kyiv, Ukraine. This act by one of the most brutal dictators that has ever walked on the face of the earth must go answered. It cannot go unanswered. And the very idea that the free nations of this world would seek to negotiate as peers with such a brutal war criminal as Vladimir Putin, to me, is unthinkable. What in the world makes anyone think that this person who has violated every single principle of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe would negotiate in good faith and agree to that negotiation? So we have a bleak situation, and it highlights NATO's importance. NATO was built for such a time as this. And in meeting with the leaders yesterday afternoon on the other end of this magnificent Capitol, I was heartened to hear that principle underscored. After the devastation of 2 world wars, NATO kept the peace by deterring the Soviet Union, and thank God we did. In the post-Cold War era, the alliance's support for Ukraine has demonstrated why NATO continues to be relevant. Most NATO members have provided substantial military, economic, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. In short, the alliance celebrates its 75th birthday from a position of strength. But we should not interpret NATO's accomplishments in the past as a license to let down our guard now. NATO's collective strength is only as strong as its members' individual commitments. The truth is that our allies need to spend more on defense. We need, in the United States, to spend more on defense. It's a necessity. We need to build modern, capable militaries that can stand shoulder to shoulder together in a fight against this axis of aggressors. We need the industrial might to match that force strength. In fact, most allies are meeting their obligations. This year, 23 of 32 NATO countries will spend at least 2% of their gross domestic product on defense, up from only 7 out of 32 at the time of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We all learned a lesson at that moment 2.5 years ago. Mr. President, at this point, I ask unanimous consent to complete my remarks prior to the scheduled roll call.
Is there an objection? Without objection.
Thank you very much to my colleagues and to the chair. The world has grown too dangerous for the remaining NATO members not to meet the 2% mark. We all must make it a priority to increase defense spending. It's shocking and unacceptable that some allies, especially some capable ones, have yet to reach the 2% requirement that they agreed to. Friends can speak candidly to one another, and so I will. Our neighbor to the north, Canada, is among this group, which has not, and for several years in the future will not reach its need. I was able to meet with Prime Minister Trudeau just a few moments ago, and was glad to hear him say that an announcement will be made from our friends in Canada, perhaps later this week, about a new plan to more quickly reach that 2% goal. And I called on him to fulfill that, that statement that he made to us in private. We look forward to that, and we congratulate him on that effort. NATO allies shouldn't outsource security to others. But this challenge presents an opportunity, one that adds to the mandate we give the incoming Secretary General. The transatlantic industrial base has withered, and we also need to attend to that, and that should be part of Secretary General Ruta's new platform. In the past, our friends of freedom have had to follow our lead as we pursue a peace through strength agenda. Today, Europe has not kept pace as it should. The United States has begun to invest heavily to rebuild its arsenal of democracy, and we need to continue doing so. But we're still waiting for the dramatic increase in European 155mm artillery production. We've yet to see the expanded lines of long-range cruise missiles, such as the Storm Shadow and the Scalp. We've heard promises of a reinvigorated defense industrial base in Europe, but those assurances have yet to be fulfilled. So as he assumes office, Secretary General Ruta should join us in recognizing the 2% commitment is in truth insufficient in light of Russia's newly mobilized war economy. There are additional issues standing in NATO's way. Its members remain mired in their own domestic issues. They must, of course, attend to these domestic concerns, but they also remain tangled up in an alliance bureaucracy that struggles with basic expansions in munitions production capacity. These challenges are significant, but Mr. Ruta and the elected governments of our alliance must not abide the status quo. We should consider this situation unsustainable, and we should say so. NATO asks its members for 2%. In my 21st Century Peace Through Strength report, I've recommended that we in the United States spend 5% of GDP on national defense, as did President Reagan. My plan is primarily designed to deter the Chinese Communist Party, but it also calls for the United States to deepen commitments to Europe. For a few examples, I recommend permanently stationing an armored brigade combat team in Poland. My plan proposes increasing our rotational deployments in Eastern Europe. We should also improve intelligence sharing and communication among allied forces. Time and again, the United States has learned, sometimes the hard way, we cannot walk away from Europe. Together, the transatlantic alliance represents half of the world's economy. There's simply no way to contain Beijing's economic aggression without working together closely. Likewise, a stagnant U.S. military budget and half-hearted European defense spending cannot contain Russia's antagonism. So thank you, Mr. President, for your indulgence, and I yield the floor.